Alright, hello. My name is Eric Roos, and here is another video on our basic map reading series. And this time we'll be talking about terrain features. So you may have already seen videos pertaining to the brown lines that are contour lines that shows the elevation. Somewhere along the way you may see something that talks about the different colors on the maps. But in this video, we're going to talk about the terrain features, and the terrain features relate directly to the contour lines because a terrain feature is depicted by a pattern of contour lines. And this is important because, again, as you may have seen on another video, if you want to get a high elevation, you would go to a hill. If you want to maybe look for water, you would go to the low ground, and as you navigate from point A to point B, you really don't want to be going up and down terrain. You'd rather stay on the same elevation ideally, and you certainly want to avoid cliffs. You want to avoid depressions. And the better that you can understand the terrain, whether you're searching it or using it to observe something or just crossing it to get from point A to point B, the more you can understand the terrain by looking at the colors on the map, the contour lines, and the patterns of contour lines by identifying the terrain features, the better. It makes life a whole lot easier. So what are the terrain features? Well, here they are by name. So there's 5 major terrain features. I think we all know what a hill is. We'll talk about a ridge. I think we know what a valley is. Saddle, depression. And there's 3 minor ones: a draw, a spur, and a cliff. But there's another one that isn't officially mentioned, but it's a cut. So it's a combination. It's a bit of a variation of a cliff and a depression. So we'll be going through them. So a hilltop, excuse me. So here's a picture of a hilltop. I think we know what that is. Go up a mountain, and there's the top. Well, when related to contour lines, I think if you already saw the video on contour lines, so you go from a certain elevation up, and there they are. So a hilltop is, because you see how pointy that top is? Well, that relates directly to how pointy the topmost elevation is. And again, depending on how, if you saw the contour line video, depending on how far apart these contour lines are, that indicates the steepness of the slope. So when you're looking at this on the map, this pattern on the map, and they really are patterns of contour lines, you see you have a hill here, but then 2 distinct peaks there. And you can pause this video to read the official definition. It's an area of high ground. It slopes down in all directions. So look, when you're on top here, no matter which way you go to a contour line of a lower elevation. Same here. Now here, there's a bit of a plateau, so it appears, that joins these 2 hilltops. But even from there on down, though, it gets lower and lower and lower. And we'll talk about this area in the middle here in perhaps a little bit. But that's what a hilltop looks like. You go up to a distinct point. Now a ridge. A ridge is basically the line that's on the very top of a mountain. Even if there's no distinct hill tops, you still have the highest elevation on a mountain. So here, here's a hilltop, 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 but the common theme there is that this is the top of the mountain, because from any point on here, whether it's at the on that hilltop or even in the middle here, you're still going down on this side, and on the other side you're still going down, 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 down. So the ridge is like this line. It's the backbone of a mountain. If you figure your own backbone, if you're skinny or thin rather, you may see the various points of someone's vertebrae sticking out the back. They form different hilltops, let's say. But nonetheless, that spine is still the backbone of the back. Well, here again, these are like the vertebrae sticking out of this thin person, but nonetheless, that's the spine, and it goes down from there. All right? A valley, I think we all have a good picture of a valley. It's basically low ground, surrounded at least on two sides by high ground. Maybe you've heard the name of a box canyon, where you have low ground in between two high grounds, but then you kind of run into a dead end. There's another high ground at the end. So once you go in there, you're kind of in a box. Well, nonetheless, here on terrain features, so okay, here on our picture here, we have high ground here, high ground in the back, high ground on the foreground here. So this low ground in between would be a valley. And what's harder to see is, well, here, if you look at the contour lines, so here's a hilltop, and it slopes down, Then over here, another, it's not easy to see, but it is. You have high ground, and it goes down to a low ground. And so this whole, you have this like basically a road here that's in between high ground, high ground, high ground. So here is your valley. Okay. So again, hilltop, and here's a high ground. I don't know that it really goes to a hilltop. At some point in time, there is a high elevation on this, and then there's the valley in between. So it's to get from here to here, you wouldn't want to go up the high ground, down, up, down, down, down. You'd want to find that low ground and go through it. That is, of course, because it is low ground, it would be swampy, marshy, or a river. Okay, so again, you have to do all kinds of analysis of the terrain to see what is the best. It may be better to go one elevation line above the valley here and just stay on solid ground and go like this. That way you're not going up, down, up, down, up, down, but you're not trudging through mud and marsh and swamp and stuff like that. So you just kind of stay one or two elevation lines above and you can get through. Okay? Saddle. I think we all have a visual picture of a saddle or camel's humps. If you have a two-humped camel, you'd sit in the middle in the saddle. But it also looks like a saddle that would go on a horse. So that's the saddle. So hilltop, and a saddle is the low ground between hilltops. And here it is. Here's the pattern of contour lines. Hilltop, it goes down, 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 and it plateaus for a little while. Then it starts to climb back up to another hilltop, down slightly, and then back up to another higher area. So in the middle here is the saddle. So if you had to get from this side of the mountain to this side of the mountain, well, you could start down here and then go up to the top of the mountain and then go down the mountain. You might fight to climb your way up, and you may fight to keep yourself from falling down. Or you could go through here. You climb up a little bit and then walk across what was basically level ground. And then you go down a little bit. Much, much easier to go through the saddle than there. However, if you wanted to be in a position to observe something, you would probably not get the same visual observation product from being here as compared to being on top here. Unless, of course, there's trees up here that as you're standing up there, you're blocked by trees, but down here it may be lower, but it may be grassy. So again, you have to analyze your terrain to see what purpose you want to achieve and what aspects of the terrain help that and what aspects hurt you. Depression. Well, just like in human mentality, when you're depressed, you have a low feeling about things. Well, you come walking along here and then you sink down into depression, all of a sudden you definitely have a low feeling. So, and in a depression, the tick marks point toward the low ground. And you can see here 2 rows of contour lines, each having the tick marks that point into the depression. That says that there is a bit of a slope getting into, because these are contour lines. There is a slope going from this elevation down. It's not like it's just a complete sudden drop. So this is a low ground. So this was a lake one time, and whatever body of water that fed it dried up or got blocked or diverted, and the water in here that had in here just evaporated, and now boom, you just have this like a sand pit in a golf course. So again, if you want to get from over here to over here, well, you could go straight line and go down in depression. Maybe get stuck in some mud or some swamp or something like that. Then you got to climb back up, and then there you're good to go. Or you could just go around it, and that might be better. If you don't want to be seen, it may be better to go down in the depression, hide your movement somehow, pop back up. But here we got high ground, and then this is low for some reason. Again, it could be a dried up lake or who knows what. Okay? So that's depression. Again, the tick marks point down towards the lower ground. Each of these rings is its own contour line. Well, a draw. Think a draw. You know what a holler is? It's like a mini valley. A mini valley. So here, it's kind of hard to see in this. It's very hard to see in this picture. But you have high ground. Got trees over here, but this mini little valley here. You can imagine a little brook coming down here. It's not big enough for a river. It's not big enough to be a valley that you would like drive through or whatever, but it's just this little mini valley. Well, here's how it is on a map. You got high ground, it comes down, high ground, it comes down. So the high grounds meet, but when they meet, there's not much maneuver room between those two high grounds. It's just a little crack. Well, that's a draw. Again, there could be a little brook in here, a little creek or creek, depending on where you come from. But that's it. Over here, it looks less obvious on this map. You got high ground, high ground, high ground. A little fissure here, basically. Well, that's that there. So sometimes to get to the high ground, it's kind of easier to go up the draw for some reason. Okay. So again, you got high ground that goes down. This kind of reminds us of the valley picture, but it's less obvious. The high ground, hilltop, hilltop, and perhaps this is big enough to be a valley, depending on how big the terrain is. But from the valley floor, there's this draw. So you can imagine maybe if this is a valley, maybe there's a river down here, and this could be a creek or a brook coming down from the high ground that feeds that river. This would be a tributary of a river here. So here, okay, here's the definition. Like a valley, but a draw is like a valley, but normally has less developed stream course, no level ground, and little or no maneuver room. Again, it's tight in there. Ground slopes upward on the slides and toward the head of the draw. So again, when you're in the draw, the ground slopes to the left, it slopes to the right, and it slopes up. And then it slopes down. Okay? Notice here, the contour lines are V-shaped. Again, if they were U-shaped, it would be a wider area and maybe qualify as a valley. But they're V-shaped because it's so tight in there. The contour lines are V-shaped with the point of the V toward the head of the draw, the high ground. Okay, so notice, here's the high ground. The V's point there like arrowheads. The arrowheads point towards the top. A spur is generally an area between draws in a way, or it's, well, here, look. On this picture of the mountain, if you can see it, so you have the ridge line up here. You have a hilltop, 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 a little bit of a hilltop, a little bit of hilltop. You can see little cracks, fissures here. Those are your draws. Draw, draw. So what do you call the land in between? It's not a draw, it's not a hilltop, it's not a ridge. Well, that's a spur. So look, here's your draw with the V's pointing towards the top, the V pointing to the top, the V pointing towards the top. But then this terrain that's in between, it just kind of sticks out of the mountain. So it's a spur. A bone spur sticks out of your heel or ankle or something like that, and it just causes problems. Your spurs stick off the side of your boots or whatever, your cowboy boots, so you can jab the horse. So here, these spurs stick out off the sides of the mountain, and in between spurs is generally a draw. So the characteristics: a spur is a short, continuously sloping line of higher ground jutting out the side of a ridge, often formed by parallel streams cutting draws down a ridge. So here, a contour lines depict a spur with the U or V pointing away from high ground. So here, just like on the draw, we had the V. Remember, a draw generally has a V because it's tight ground. So the draw has the V pointing towards the high ground, but a spur, depending how wide or tight it is, will have either a U or a V. Here's like a V here, right? It's more like a V. So that U points towards the low ground, and the draw, it points towards the high ground. A cliff, again, something you want to avoid. Well, they're good if you want to stand there and look off in the terrain, because there's nothing in front of you to obscure your observation. But if you need to get from one point to another, you generally don't want to encounter a cliff, because then you got to back up and go around one way or the other until you can find a more gradual way to get down to where you're going. But anyway, here, now this is a little hard. It's hard to figure out. So up here, you have high ground. You start to go down, 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 down. But now all of a sudden you encounter remember the depression where the tick marks point towards the low ground? So here, how all these different contour lines come together. Contour lines of different elevation, they come together. Contour lines of different elevation come together, and then they all fall. That is your cliff right there. Cliff. Okay? I don't know how else to explain that, but wherever you see the contour lines come together into a point, and then it just falls, that's a cliff. Now, on some of the maps, I've seen it, you don't have the tick marks. So the real clue is where the contour lines come together. When they meet, when different elevations meet, you know something funny's going on. And that funny is there's a drop off. Okay? Now a cut. This is not officially a major or minor terrain feature, but it's still relevant. So here, to get this railroad through the mountains, they had to cut away some mountains, and they had to fill in a valley. So let's see what we got here. Up here, where it's high ground, we have tick marks facing in. They face in from both sides. That's where they had to make a depression in the middle. That's your cut. But then down here in the area, so here's like a cliff. Some kind of cliff is going on here. You can see the contour lines meeting. Some kind of low ground. All of a sudden there's a drop off there. Well, they had to get the railroad through there. So instead of cutting, they had to fill. And so here you see the tick marks go from inside the train tracks, let's say, inside the track, because at the cut, now the tick marks go away. Because this is low ground and this is high ground. It's high ground because they filled it in. They filled in this area. So they created high ground, which then resulted in the depression on either side. So where there's high ground, there's a cut. Where there's low ground, they fill it in. And you can see how the tick marks reverse themselves. So here we go. We're going to try to put this all together. So I'll give you a minute. Just look at this. See what you see so far. Can you identify a hilltop? Can you visualize the ridge? Can you visualize the spur? A draw? Okay, so let's do that. So here we have the small circles. small circles, or a circle is the hilltop. So here's a hilltop. It's a bit steep here, then it goes back. So it's steep, 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 then it starts to gradual off. Here's another hilltop. Hilltop, this is really steep here. Here it's relatively steeper than over here. This is steeper than over here. So here's hilltop, hilltop, hilltop. What's the area between a hilltop? What would this be? That's your saddle. Area between two hilltops, saddle. And what do we call this backbone that goes across this mountain? Because from this line here, it generally slopes down on the two sides, all the way around. So that's your ridge. A ridge punctuated by hilltop, hilltop, hilltop with two saddles. That's your ridge. Now here, look, you got V-shaped contour lines pointing towards high ground. That's a draw. How tight that is. Tight, tight, very, very tight. Here's another draw. But what's the area between draws here? You still have ground sticking out above these draws. Without these ground above, you wouldn't have the ground below. The ground below being the draw. So what's this area here? It sticks out. That's your spur. Notice the spur points towards lower ground. The draw points towards higher ground. Now here is that example of some kind of drop-off that does not have the tick marks in it. So we go from the high ground, we hit lower, lower, lower. But you see how these two contour lines intersect right here. And then they intersect over here. So this line here, once you get off this hilltop a little bit, all of a sudden there's a 1 or 2 contour line drop off very, very quickly right here. So it's a cliff. Doesn't seem to be too far, but it's something you don't want to try to walk over. It's a sudden drop off here. So you'd want to get down, you'd probably want to go down this side and then just circle back. Not go straight down that way. Especially if it's rainy or loose rock. Okay, so hilltop, 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 saddle, ridge, draw, 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 spur, 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 spur. Now, down here, I guess you got to visualize that there's high terrain over here. So this whole area here in between these, that goes past these spurs down here, that's your valley. And you can these are streams the streams through these draws that feed these larger streams down here. Over here we have another road. We have tick marks facing away. So it went from a high ground, it crossed a little bit lower ground and went back to the high grounds. So rather than have the railroad come along, or road, or whatever it is, come along and then dip down a contour line and then climb back up, they filled in here. Now here, that's a bridge there. So there's a larger creek or stream that comes down off this draw for some reason. And so to get across there, they put a bridge. Okay? Woo. All right, now I don't know if you can see this, but this is the last slide. This is the Lake Anna State Park. So here's the beach area that some of you may have seen, and here's where they did the swim. They started here, and they went in the clockwise rotation to where they took off their wetsuits, got on their bikes, and then went wherever they went. So you can see here, there's a road coming down here, and the road comes down. The road avoids a lot of terrain features. It does come down, but they made this road in between other places. You can see the contour lines. It was better to put the road this way than go up, 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 no, down, 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 and then hit a stream and come down. They put it here. They avoided the stream. The net control station, you can see here, here's a closed circle. This is high ground. It goes from 360 feet to 370 feet. So what did we say was the middle of high ground? Half the distance more than what's your tallest. So it went from 360 to 370. So there's a 10 feet difference between contour lines. Half of 10 is 5. The last contour line is 370. So therefore you can assume or plan that the high ground here, where we had the net control station, was 375 feet. As compared to down at the beach, where it was like 250, or over here, which is like 340. So this is the highest point. Actually, this and this are equal. There's a bit of a saddle here. So this and this. So I put the net control station with its mast antenna here, and I had my mast up. Even though I'm lower terrain, I had my mast up, and the hope, yes, hope is generally not a course of action, but the hope was that with my mast antenna at this low terrain and this mast antenna at the high terrain, that we would be able to see each other. And sure enough, we did. And by having a tall mast antenna at this high point here, the hope, again, hope is not a course of action, but that's all we had at the time, was any radios along the roads here and these campgrounds here, that antenna reaching down from on high to these antennas, the handhelds, and the handhelds reaching up to the heavens to talk to that antenna. Hopefully they will be able to see each other, and yes, they did in general. Now, from here down to here, I don't think it worked. That's why I had to talk from where I was. I was able to talk from here to here, but this was too much, this distance here between, because of the vegetation. Okay, so so not only did I, but also the guy from the radio club, the Fredericks Radio Club that helped out, we both did the same map analysis, and we both came to the same conclusion, that this would be the high point for net control. Obviously, I had to be down here regardless, but we both identified that there were other high grounds here that if we put mast antennas on, it would greatly improve our communications, but unfortunately, we only had the two masts, that being this one and mine. So regardless, we stitched together a functional map, but we used terrain reconnaissance to figure it out. Okay, so there you have it. We talked about the 5 terrain features, the 5 major terrain features, the 3 minor terrain features, and I threw in cut, so it's not a surprise. Again, knowing the colors of a map, the contour lines, the terrain features, putting all this together helps you to understand the terrain in case you cannot physically be there. It helps you plan a movement. It helps you plan communications. It helps you plan observation. So it's very important to know all these factors as you search an area. If you had a search, if you're doing a search and rescue mission, you probably want people on high ground to look down areas, and you could map out how you want to get to the different areas. You want to go to this one area straight line distance, or you want to go a little around the way to avoid cliffs and terrains and marshes and bad places. Okay, that's it. Bye.